These are the times that try men's souls. The government is corrupt. The political system is dysfunctional. Both political parties have not only failed us, they have betrayed us. We cannot trust them with our futures. We, the people, must take back control ourselves. Good evening. Welcome to the Revolution. And welcome to Revolution Television and Revolution Radio. Thank you for joining us at aea4usa.com. My name is Lawrence Hebron. And now on to our revolutionary look at the news. Headline: Hillary Clinton's private email account raises question of judgment and legality. Contrary to the Obama administration's, quote, very specific guidance, end quote, that officials should use government email servers to conduct government business, possibly contrary to the law, and definitely contrary to good judgment, Hillary Clinton used a private email service while conducting official government business when serving as Secretary of State. She claimed that it was merely a matter of convenience, not wanting to carry two devices, one for personal matters and one for state business. Really? I mean, doesn't she have people to do that for her? Besides, just last month, she told an audience in the Silicon Valley that she uses several devices, saying, quote, I have an iPad, a mini iPad, an iPhone, and a BlackBerry, end of quote. I guess whatever she's up to now is more demanding than when she headed the State Department. Also, regarding all those personal emails Hillary alluded to between her and her husband, well, on the same day she spoke of these, the Wall Street Journal reported that Bill Clinton's spokesman stated that the former president had made exactly 2 emails in his entire life, neither one to Hillary. One was to John Glenn, the former astronaut and senator, and the other to U.S. troops in the Adriatic. So, can you spell pathological liar? First, let's look at the legality of the practice. Clinton said that she didn't break any laws, but Form OF-109 requires departing State Department officials to affirm that they have turned over all official documents, including emails, when they leave office. It is a felony to fail to do so or to lie about it, and it says so on the document Hillary had to sign when leaving her post. So, either she did not sign Form OF-109 as required by law, or she perjured herself if she did sign it and indicated that she had turned over all pertinent documents. Of course, why should we expect anything different? Perjury just seems to be a family trait among the Clintons. I did not have sexual relations with that woman. Remember that one? But even if what she did was not illegal, and that is a very big if, using a personal server is far less secure than a government service. So why would she opt for less security when dealing with such important government business? Oh yeah, as Lois Lerner discovered, it's pretty hard to completely eradicate your trail when using government resources. Is this why Clinton chose to put sensitive American interests at risk? Actually, Hillary learned this lesson long before the Lois Lerner issue arose. As a young staffer on the House Judiciary Committee investigating Watergate, Hillary would have learned that you don't keep the tapes, you burn them. Had Nixon done that, he never could have been forced to resign. Hillary also learned from the Whitewater investigation into hers and Bill's business transactions that you keep critical information in private hands so investigators can't get to them before you have a chance to burn the tapes. It was the Whitewater special prosecutor's license to snoop that led him to expand the scope of his investigation from Whitewater to Monica Lewinsky, which in turn led to Bill's impeachment. It seems that Hillary is well trained in duplicity and of a mindset to use that training. She admits now that the use of private servers was a mistake. I'm just waiting for her to try to diffuse the furor by asking, what difference does it make now? Or did she learn her lesson there too? Well, Ian, This woman has amassed such a poor personal and professional record throughout her life that anyone else with such a resume would have a hard time getting a job as a cashier at a 99-cent store. Going back to her dismissal from the White House Judiciary Committee during the Watergate investigation, to Whitewater, to tolerating Bill's serial adultery, to Benghazi, to Emailgate, just to name a few, she has not established a reputation for integrity, nor wisdom, nor pretty much any other honorable personal trait. Why would anyone seriously consider her as a candidate for the highest office in the land? And so I have to wonder, Ian, has the Obama presidency so lowered the bar that Hillary can actually look good?
Hillary will never look good in my eyes. I'm sorry. This is classic Dutch duck, dodge, and weave, you know, to the nth degree. These people have just proven once again that the political goal is the only thing that is important to them. The political goal is more important than the country. It's more important than the truth. It's more important than the political party, even their own political party. These people are nothing, they're about nothing but power. All they want to be is in power and in control. The Clintons have proven that the only thing that they know how to do is lie to get what they want and to get where they want.
Well, some people would say that the Clintons do have a record, so let's take a quick look at Hillary's resume. It appears that she was dismissed from her job as a staffer on the House Judiciary Committee investigating Watergate because of concerns about her integrity. Other than that, she has 3 major entries on her resume: 8 years as First Lady, 8 years as a United States Senator, and 4 years as Secretary of State. Other than the train wreck known as Hillary Care back when she was the First Lady, Ian, can you think of a single accomplishment that would warrant faith in her ability to run the nation?
None whatsoever. I mean, let's look at this. Their run as governor put them in position to where he could manipulate a seat as president. So what did Hillary do? She rode the coattails of Bill Clinton's presidency as First Lady into the Senate. She would never have been elected senator if it wasn't for Bill being president. So then she rode the coattails of that into a political election, and then the coattails of that into the State Department under Obama. And that was just a consolation prize to shut her up, actually. I mean, let's be honest about that. So what did she do when she was in the State Department? She made a mess of foreign policy. She made an absolute mess of the Benghazi situation. They did not reply with additional resources when asked by the ambassador and the staff in Benghazi. So let's look at what her record really is. It's a record of failure. The only accomplishment that she tried to do was her Hillary Care, which was an absolute disaster. That is what led us to our current Obamacare scenario, which is also a disaster. And I just don't see this getting any better at all.
Well, I do want to be fair. We want to be fair here in Revolution Radio, and in all fairness, we have to admit that Barack Obama had an even thinner resume when he became president. And look at how well that has worked out. Oops, maybe that wasn't such an endorsement after all. Well, yeah, her record is one basically of a lack of integrity and a lack of accomplishments. Why would anyone consider her to be a serious candidate for any office in the land, much less the highest office? Well, next headline: U.S.-trained Iraqi units accused of ISIS-like atrocities. Beheadings, crucifixions, burning alive, and possibly chemical attacks. The list of ISIS atrocities is long and appalling, but apparently not unique to ISIS. In fact, It appears that U.S.-trained Iraqi troops have been indulging a similar appetite for the barbaric. Late last week, U.S. State Department and Department of Defense confirmed that Iraq officials are investigating allegations that its own troops have engaged in a wide range of savage acts, including torture, extrajudicial executions, dragging corpses behind Humvees, ISIS-like beheadings, and displaying human heads as trophies. Images supporting these allegations have been appearing in Iraqi social media since last summer. The U.S. has spent in the vicinity of $25 billion to train Iraqi army forces since the U.S. invasion in 2003. Many of those forces are now fighting to expel ISIS fighters from strongholds, including the cities of Mosul and Tikrit. Revolution Radio has recently reported on U.S. efforts to prepare these forces for an upcoming assault on Mosul. The report of atrocities committed by our allies should be shocking, but not surprising. In fact, allegations of brutality and torture by these Shiite-led Iraqi government forces go back to the early days of the war. Charges of anti-Sunni abuse in Iraqi prisons led to widespread Sunni opposition to the government. This helped to fuel the growth of al-Qaeda in Iraq, which in turn evolved into the Islamic State, or ISIS. So, it looks like a fair case could be made that there is a direct causative link between the atrocious behavior of our Iraqi allies and the monstrous behavior of ISIS, which in turn may have inspired the recent round of war crimes by our U.S.-trained Iraqi allies. So, can we really expect any prospect for things getting better over there? And now the plot thickens even more. Back in 1997, the so-called Leahy Law was first introduced. It prohibits the Pentagon and the U.S. State Department from giving assistance to any foreign military units that violate human rights with impunity. So, get a load of this. It looks like we may be legally prohibited from supporting the very Iraqi units which we spent millions of dollars to train and upon which we have pinned our hopes for combating ISIS. Oh my. Only the Democrats and Republicans working their collective magic could concoct such a catastrophe. Well, it certainly seems like we need to get to the bottom of these allegations to determine their accuracy. Yep, you'd think so, wouldn't you? Yet despite this, State Department spokesperson Jen Psaki said that the United States would not be engaging in its own investigation. She said, quote, U.S. officials from Washington and Baghdad continue to raise our concerns with senior government of Iraq officials and have been doing that for some time, end quote. Oh, well, you've been doing that for some time, have you? That makes me feel better. And just exactly what has been accomplished. All that this statement does is allow the administration to continue its ineffective, blood-soaked, trillion-dollar policies paid for with American blood and American dollars. And even if we should succeed in uprooting ISIS and casting them into the fires of hell, do you have any reason to believe that version 2.0 isn't waiting around the corner and getting ready to arise from the ashes? In fact, wouldn't you be a fool to expect otherwise? So why do we keep following the policies of fools? Ian, Sunni, Shiite, ISIS, Iraqi allies, is this a case of Tweedledee or Tweedledum? Do you think that we have any reason to expect things to get any better, even if we do vanquish ISIS?
None whatsoever. The enemy of my enemy is my friend. That seems to sum up the policy of our country for the last 50 to 100 years. And it's also exactly what brought us the Taliban. So I don't see how this is ever going to get any better. we've made these people our friends, and they are not much different than the ones that we're fighting. The only difference is now we call them our friend because we went in there and we defeated them, and now our other enemy is more of an enemy than this particular enemy was before. The logic of this just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I can't understand where the thinking comes from at all.
There's another case of extending into the foreign affairs, the same thing we have done in domestic affairs, which is we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again with failed results, and yet we can't think of anything different to do. Now, I have to question this too on the moral issue. If we have allied ourselves with forces that just may be as evil as ISIS, then what does that make us? And how can the Obama administration simply look the other way? Ian, what are your thoughts?
Man, you know, unfortunately, this draws us down into the sewer with them. You know, we can't defeat these guys by using ones that are just like them as our allies. What does that make us look like to the rest of the world? You know, we've got this scenario where we can't seem to defeat these people without using these other Arab forces, because we'll be viewed as being anti-Islam. Well, let's talk about that. Maybe Islam is the problem. They all seem to run in the same circles. They all seem to have the same methodology. They all seem to think that this torture and brutality is the only way to accomplish what they want to do. Again, my enemy is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, maybe we need to find some new friends.
And that's a great way to lead into the next segment of our program, the interview we're going to have with Tony Burg. We have been allying ourselves over there with various Islamic elements, and it has led nowhere but to growing disaster. We've become increasingly entangled. As I made a comment I made here a few weeks back, said, you know, when you walk up to a cesspool, you basically have two options: walk around it or step into it. We stepped into it. And when you find yourself in a cesspool, you basically have two options. You can stay there or you can get out. We're staying there. We're staying immersed in this cesspool of Islamic terror that is getting nowhere. But there are other options available to us, even though our administration doesn't want to seem to consider them. Now, there's no question that great evil is being committed in the Middle East. There's no question that the Obama administration is failing miserably in dealing with that evil. The administration in Washington is supposed to be our agent, both here at home and abroad. But what can the individual do when his government fails him? When we see the summary executions, when we see the beheadings, when we see people burned to death, when we see the crucifixions, when we see the total ineptitude of our government in addressing this evil, what can I do? What can you do? Well, today, we are honored to have as our guest Tony Burg. Tony served in the United States Marine Corps, has been active in a variety of patriot and Christian causes and campaigns, and has worked closely with the American Eagle Alliance. Today, Tony is going to tell us things about the situation in the Middle East that you probably have not heard. So, Tony, first of all, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Now, you actually are in personal contact with some of the fighters in Iraq, fighters who have been engaged against ISIS and have actually achieved victories in that battle. First, if you would explain to us who these people are these other Muslims?
Well, Lawrence, before we get to that, I think it's important to recognize the diversity in Iraq. We here in America tend to clump all Muslims together, and we kind of have this ignorant view that everybody in Iraq, Syria, Turkey, Iran, they're all Muslims. That's simply not the case. Granted, in Iraq, 78% of the population is Muslim. There is a number of minority groups, excuse me, that are particularly of interest that are not Muslim. They're Kurds and Assyrians, whom are Christian and other forms of religion that are absolutely in opposition to the Islamic State. Now, these minority groups pretty much live in the northern side of Iraq, from Mosul north, in the Nevada Plains. And they've been pushed since 2003 further north and even to an exodus out of the country to avoid the onslaught of ISIS. So, as a result, there are a few groups up there that are fighting to repel ISIS and protect their people in their area. You have the Pegmersha, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, Kurds. You have the YPG. The Pegmersha are a mix of religion, some still Muslim. The YPG are predominantly non-Muslim Kurds. And then you have the Assyrian Christians that are Christians and believers in Jesus Christ. In fact, they are the indigenous people to that area, stemming through Syria, Iraq, and some other parts over there. They've been persecuted for over 4,500 years in that area because of the strong Islamic view and just the nature of their geographical location. They've fallen victim to every whim of political movement over there. In fact, the last few regimes in charge of Iraq have really done a number to not represent them in their government. They do have a representative form of government, and they're allowed, I believe, one person to sit on the board or parliament. I don't recall the exact terminology that they use for that position. And this has been an ongoing thing for a number of years. It's just gotten increasingly worse in 2003. So, more to your point, who are these people? The Kurds, both groups of the Kurds have been sponsored by the United States and other governments to help repel ISIS and protect their people. The Assyrian Christians were formed from a 40-man militia with zero fighting experience that joined the YPG Kurds. They've been fighting to repel ISIS and ISIL and protect their own people and land. Now, apparently, at some point in time, there was a little bit of a problem, and the Assyrian Christians believed that they could protect their towns and their Christians a little bit better than the YPG seemed to have been helping. They were maybe neglecting them a little bit, and I don't know how accurate that is, but those are the reports that I've been given, and that's what gave birth to what I'm about to talk about. So these 40 people went back to their towns and raised a citizens militia. This citizens militia is now known as the Dwekna Shah. The Dwekna Shah in English simply means the sacrificers. They're sacrificing themselves for their greater cause, preserving their people and their land, and repelling this extremist form of Islam. Now, the fighters that are there are indigenous to the area, but when they split from the YPG, they lost, I guess, their sanctioned status and their funding from the international community. Though the international community is well aware of them, and there are talks about supporting them, it has yet to happen. It's been nearly a year. They've been fighting on their own. And of course, they fight alongside the other groups. They have a vested interest and a common goal to repel ISIS. However, they are on their own, and they are arming and training their own people. They are Christian, but they are protecting everybody in that area, even the non-Christians that basically don't want to fall to an Islamic State that ISIS and ISIL is trying to form. So, to that point, it sparked the attention of the international community. There's volunteers flocking from Canada, the United States, Great Britain, and Australia, and they're voluntarily fighting for these three groups. The first two, the Pegmersha and the YPG, they're actually organized military outfits. They have vetting processes, training. They pay their troops. Because of the circumstances that the Dwekna Shah, the Assyrian Christian group, has found themselves in, they have no funding. So the fighters that volunteer there are required to show up with all their own gear and enough money to buy their weapon systems And in fact, a lot of them are helping train that group to make them more sufficient and more capable fighting force. They are small in numbers, and at this point, they're not necessarily an offensive military, though I'm sure that they're not feeling that way sometimes. With ISIS closing in on some of their towns, they're having to evacuate the people, patrol the towns day and night, escort kids to school, stand guard over church ceremonies, and escort people to work on a daily basis. So in terms of who is the groups that are over there trying to repel ISIS, these fighters on the ground, it's really the Director Shah that's forging a way for a much bigger movement in terms of international support because of the fact of their heritage leading all the way back, to the days of Jesus. In fact, they are, I believe, the only group that speak the native dialect that was spoken back in the biblical days. So there is a growing interest across all of Christianity worldwide. But not just that, the atrocities occurring in Iraq today and Syria have drawn a lot of attention just from regular people, Christians and non-Christians alike, that have just finally said enough is enough and something needs to be done in order to stop this evil from amassing across the globe. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it gives us a good feel for the extent of this. We hear a lot about the Iraqi forces, we hear a lot about ISIS, but you've told us about other things, Peshmerga, other Kurdish forces, Christian forces that I think a lot of Americans have heard nothing about, and in fact the name of one of those organizations. Now you have contact with some of the people over there. Pretty much all we learn about the situation from the basic media here is that ISIS has grown quickly, it is vicious, it is savage, and we have a minimal effort going on against it. What can you add to that picture? What can you tell us about the situation, say the military situation over there, things that the average American may not know about? I understand that this Christian militia was involved in a victory against ISIS, I think, back in November.
That's true. They've had multiple victories. Whether it's a firefight that they're largely successful in, or whether it was safely extracting and protecting the citizens of the Nineveh Plains, they've had a number of successes. Even with the limited hardware that they have, weapon systems, they're basically a light infantry unit without even the full capabilities that, let's say, a United States infantry unit would have. They don't have armored Humvees, they don't have shoulder-fired rockets, they don't have a lot of heavy guns, and they're still repelling ISIS. I think that it's important for the American... I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I had nothing there.
I think it's important for the American public to understand that it's not just all Muslims that want to see the Western world fall or convert. There are groups within Iraq who are very much against it, and they're standing up and fighting. I think the problem is that we've been in this war so long, and we've paid such a price, both financially and with the lives of our soldiers and allied soldiers, that as Americans, we often don't want to get involved in international entanglements, and I'm one for more of an isolationist perspective. However, I think we also have to balance that with the reality of whatever circumstances are there. And in this case, ISIS is not necessarily a well-trained military, but they are a well-funded military. And they've grown in numbers. They've been able to recruit a number of people, unfortunately, even Westerners, that fall victim to their allure and deception. And the numbers that they're pushing now in their ranks, I'm not sure of, but they've grown so much. When we pulled out, they just filled this vacuum in that whole region. We're not talking about just Iraq. You know, we've seen the same thing happening in Syria. So the Iraqi Guard, the Iraqi military, whom we trained and left the country to, really was ill-equipped. They were unable to fend off ISIS, and very often would turn and run when they were being attacked. That's given way to ISIS having advanced weaponry, tanks, Humvees, even gunships, helicopters, heavy equipment, you name it. This has been an issue that has caused them to be able to push and grow exponentially in terms of geographical control. However, the flip side is that they have no expertise to maintain this equipment. They have no logistics to maintain it. When it breaks down, it's no good. So I think that we still have a good chance to save some of these people and maybe bring some peace to the Iraqi region. But it's going to take a lot more effort. And I know that Obama has talked about some programs at sending over troops to train and so on. I'm personally of the opinion that, and against my regular opinion, that we need full military might. And this needs to be stopped. This has been often equated to, Hitler and his effort in World War II. And I think, aside from the racial differences and religious differences, it's the exact same thing. It's just an evil atrocity. And the American people need to know that that is who ISIS is. Their name even tells you their agenda. ISIS stands for the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. A lot of people don't know that. Interestingly enough, it's dwarfed into ISIL, which is the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, or Levant. The Levant actually is a larger region. It includes Syria, Lebanon, Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. So just in the name ISIL alone, you have a very good picture of what their intentions are.
Well, the group you've talked about, the Christian group there, I want to make this clear. It sounds like from what you're saying that they are essentially a defensive organization. They don't have imperialist ambitions like ISIL, as you pointed out. Again, the Levant is a much larger area than just Iraq and Syria. But these are essentially defensive organizations. Is that correct?
I would say that it is technically, because they don't have the numbers to be anything else. Ultimately, we would like to raise an army and be able to assist in eliminating ISIS and the development of the Islamic State in that region. Because they are low in numbers, they have predominantly taken on the role as like a Marine security force, patrolling towns, guarding, escorting services, things of that nature, evacuations and other types of civil actions. Though they are armed, and with the capability, they could become a full military force capable of repelling ISIS more effectively than, in my opinion, even the two Kurd groups that are fighting them. They have the heart and the will to survive, and the selflessness to go after them. They know what it means for their posterity.
So essentially, they're doing pretty much what any responsible parents would do, neighbors would do, homeowners would do to protect their community, except their community is being attacked by something as bad as or worse than some of the worst gangs that we know of in the area. I want to ask, we just had a question. We have a listener in Spain, and has forwarded a question to us. In your opinion, from what you know about what's going on there, and from your contact with the people who are over there, your firsthand contact with them, and again, I put our own historical perspective on this, knowing how things happened in the past, dating back to the 7th century and for centuries afterward. The question is, should Spain fear ISIS and its sympathizers? We've already seen it spreading into Libya. They speak of reconquering Spain again. So is this a concern for Europeans, for the Spanish and others? What is your opinion from the conversations you've had over there and the research you've done?
Well, I hate being the fearmonger. I stand against that. I hate the propaganda. I hate the fearmongering that goes on all too often. But I have to say, based on the extensive research that me and my group has done and the American Eagle Alliance has partaken in, we recognize that we're having attacks all over the world, especially in the West and in Britain, in America, in Australia, and in Spain. These extremists have already expanded beyond the globe, or rather around the globe. So, in part to your last question, what else does the American people need to know that they don't know? I think there's a disconnect in urgency, because I don't think that the American people or other people around the world that are, you know, thousands of miles away from this genocide that's taking place, they just don't, it's not real to them. Well, for the gentleman from Spain, all I can say is that if we allow them to take, you know, make the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria and the whole Levant, we're going to have to fight them one day. Their whole purpose is world domination and submission to Allah. So without stomping them out now, we're going to have to fight them later. It doesn't make any sense from a tactical perspective to give them that opportunity to form, grow, train, and improve their tactics. So should Spain be in fear? Absolutely.
I think
Spain is on the same continent. We're talking about America. I have confirmed reports of 35 schools and training camps in the United States that are owned by the Muslims of America, the sister company to the Jamaat al-Fuqah, which is the Syrian, or I believe the Syrian base. Now, we've had the FBI close down 2 of these camps in the recent past, but unfortunately, because of our, you know, U.S. Constitution and state constitutions, we protect certain rights of freedom of expression. I wonder if this political correctness might be our Achilles heel. My point is, it's already spread around the globe, and if we allow them to gain more control, strengthen numbers, and deceive more innocent people that fall victim to this twisted sympathy, everybody has to worry, not just Spain.
Well, history tends to repeat itself. That's kind of one of my areas of interest for nearly half a century now. And the saying that history tends to repeat itself is very true. I saw an excellent presentation done by a scholar in this field who tracked the course of Islam, starting with the 7th century. That's back in the 600s. And he would put a red dot every time there was a battle, as Islam, which is an aggressive religious organization, you see these red dots pop up, and they started in the area pretty much where ISIL is now, in the area there to the east of the Mediterranean, and these dots just kept spreading and spreading and spreading farther and farther west, and then they went up north into Europe. And the areas, and after a few centuries of this, you saw the map just bleed red as Islam spread throughout this area. And 2 of the areas where there was the greatest concentration in Europe was in Spain and in the area around the South Mediterranean, Italy and the islands around there. So I think, yes, Spain is in a very, very dangerous situation. There's a natural bridge there with Gibraltar. There's a place there, it's a choke point and a very strategic area. So Spain is strategic in a lot of respects. It's been an important country through so much of history, and the Muslims are aware of this. So I think, yes, Spain needs to be very, very cautious about this, very careful, and very dedicated to stopping this. Ian has a question, too, he'd like to ask at this point. And then we'll have a couple more for you, Tony.
Sure.
Yeah, Tony, you know, speaking of the spread through history, and history have a tendency of repeating itself, I've taken some criticism for saying that I believe that the first shots have already been fired in the Third World War. And as a bit of a history buff, I see a lot of parallels between what's happening right now and the rise of the Nazi empire in the 30s and 40s. And what I see is that even though, you know, the Nazis were basically fed by racism, and this is a religious hatred coming out of Islam, the parallels to me are scary. We have a scenario where we have you know, a rise of a very, very evil empire, and a problem with the administration and other international officials. They don't even want to acknowledge the fact that there is evil and that this is rising. Do you also see these parallels with the rise of the Nazis in the 30s and 40s?
Absolutely. I even hinted to that a little earlier. I think you're dead on, Ian, and I think that you're already on record as being the person, and the American Eagle Alliance is the first organization to be on record calling the first shots to World War III having already occurred, and it's going to stem from the Islamic State movement. Unfortunately, I agree with you. I think there's a strong probability that that may in fact be the case. And I think that it's going to depend on how the international community coordinates dealing with this or not, which will determine the results and the ultimate history for our future youth to look back and see where we went wrong. You know, just as we had World War I, World War II, we're definitely repeating ourselves.
Well, obviously, there's a great deal to be concerned about, and Tony, it's obvious from what you've talked about that you are concerned about it. Why have you taken such an interest in this matter? What's the personal aspect? What is it that kind of pushed the button that got you involved? Because I know with everything else you're doing, you have committed a great deal of time and effort and resources to raising awareness and, as we'll see soon, raising other things to combat this evil in the Middle East. So what is it about this that has touched a chord with you?
Well, I've really had an eye on this conflict from the beginning as a Marine, as a Christian American, and over the years, it just wears on you. You see this happen over and over, you know, this genocide, this slaughtering of innocent people. And for a number of years, I even wrote it off. Let them kill each other, you know, maybe we'll be better off. And I realized how ignorant that was, that I had a lack of important information. And for my personal reasons, I just got sick and tired of seeing innocent, unarmed combatants being slaughtered, murdered, tortured, crucified, and enslaved. In America, you know, though there is some debate, you know, we live under a constitution that affords us certain freedoms and liberties, and we've paid with blood, sweat, and tears to have it. And we do have at least a remnant of that left. And I really compare it to the American departure from the King in Britain. I think that these people are seeking freedom and liberty. They don't want to mess with anyone else. They just don't want to be messed with. And when I sit there and I watch 8-year-old girls and 11-year-old boys begging for their lives and being shot in cold blood, it just disturbs me, and I think it should disturb anybody. And I just got sick and tired of seeing it, and I felt like somebody had to do something about it. To my surprise, there's a lot of people doing things about it. Not enough, but a lot. So I'm not new at this, and I'm not leading the charge, but I've inserted myself into this so that I can help the best way I can. My wife reminded me that she didn't marry me when I was a Marine, and that she didn't want me to go to war. But I know in her heart that if I needed to go and felt I needed to go, she would support me. I have a really good friend who convinced me that due to my ability to speak and talk to a lot of people in our patriotic community here in America, I could probably do a lot better getting the word out and drumming up support to take care of these people rather than just being over there wielding an AK-47.
Well, you've been doing that. You've been talking to individuals. You've been talking to organizations. I think a lot of this is news to a lot of people, but I do think it touches a responsive chord with them as well. This profound, disgusting evil that we see going on, being perpetrated by these Muslims, ISIS and others, Al-Qaeda and so forth, our Iraqi allies, is just very distasteful, would be a mild word, one that we can use on the air here. How can Americans help? You've helped to increase our awareness of what's going on. So those where these seeds fall on fertile ground, what can they do now to help?
There's a lot of things that the Americans can do, and others can do that hear this message. Yes, I am trying to get the word out and bring awareness, but there's a lot more awareness needed. Immediately, the volunteers, both native and foreign, that are fighting ISIS, they need help. Shipping supplies have been interrupted. They need money. If you go to the Dwek Nashah Facebook, and Dwek Nashah is spelled D-W-E-K-H-N-A-W-S-A-H. They have a link to be contacted, and they'll send you to their PayPal. I confirmed yesterday morning at 9 a.m. that PayPal was still good. It wasn't compromised, that they're receiving funds, and it lands right to a bank they have access to in northern Iraq. That's what Americans can do to take up this fight right now. In addition, they're looking for military veterans and police officer veterans or veteran law enforcement agents. They're looking for people that might have a background in a quasi-law enforcement, maybe a particular security background and things of that nature they would consider. They need more people on the ground to defend their cities, and they need people that can train. Immediately, their number one priority is medical personnel. They need medics. They need EOD experts. ISIS is rigging up these homes when they're coming in, and Direct Shah's evacuating and bringing the people back. Well, everything's booby-trapped. They don't have the expertise to handle this. Even the Americans that are there, a lot of them are not experts in explosives. So those are the things that can happen right away. If I lose you because my signal is getting weak, you know how to direct people to me. You can actually support the Direct Shah directly by going through their PayPal. You can also use their email, which is Direct Shah, but you drop the A, add the word Iraq at Gmail. So it's DWEKHNAWSHIRAQ@gmail.com. That is their account. No one else has control of it. That'll send the money through PayPal right to them. If you have a problem processing PayPal, or you want to go and process PayPal through us, there'll be links on the American Eagle Alliance website. We can process other forms of payment for you. We get them every dollar. We keep nothing. It's critical that we provide them all the support we can. It's important that those volunteers have all the equipment that they need. We can vet the volunteer. We can give them their equipment list and the things that they're going to need. With the proper funds, we can help subsidize some of the airline costs because they have to pay that, and they're going to need cash in their pocket. An AK-47 is about $500 US, give or take. They do get a bigger bang for the buck in U.S. money over there, so it does beat sending supplies sometimes, and the cost to send supply even by the tonnage. So they need a lot of other equipment. Most of what they need, they can get in Iraq. They can even get armored Humvees. They're trying to come up with money for that. They're working out a little Toyota four-banging four-cylinder trucks and four-door cars, and it's just not adequate for this type of operation. People can spread the word. They can be their own activists for the Direct Shah, for the awareness of what's going on in northern Iraq. They can support by spreading the word and by getting other people to spread the word. I'm here just as a conduit. I do have contacts with their media contacts, so if there's any reporters out there, anyone that wants to speak to their media contact, I can get them in touch with them. I'm in touch with leadership, and I'm in touch with the actual fighters. I get real-time intel updates of what their needs are, what the situation is, and I try to adjust accordingly. So anybody that wants to know more information can contact me. My information will be on the American Eagle Alliance website, or they can also email me at c4lguy@gmail.com. My phone number will be posted on the American Eagle Alliance website as well.
You mentioned that your signal may be getting a little weak here. Before we have to cut off from this conversation, you've been working on this for a while now. What kind of response have you received so far in your campaign to get help for these Christian militias and others over there?
Lawrence, I personally was dissatisfied with the international effort to hold back ISIS. And I was sick and tired of the atrocities occurring, and I decided to take a stand. I think it's the right stand. I think it's a moral stand. I think that a lot of Americans and other Western countries aren't quite aware of everything that's going on in the complexities, and about 50% tend to block out this and write it off as a problem over there, and that it's not a problem in their home. The response that I have gotten has been phenomenal. It almost disproved what I just told you now about 50% not caring. I have emails and phone calls coming in from all over the world, mostly in the United States because that's where I'm based, from social media advertisements and networking. I have a list of volunteers building. We've received hundreds of dollars just in the last 48 hours that I've already transmitted to Direct Shah. And by the way, I would like to say thank you to all of you patriots who have helped and you have donated and you are willing to volunteer. And directly from the Director shop, they said thank you. They need it.
Well, thank you for all your efforts, Tony. Thank you for your commitment. You're continuing that hoorah spirit, standing up first to fight for right and freedom and to keep our honor clean. So thank you for those efforts that you are doing, for the sacrifice that you're making. And again, the AEA will be a conduit and a point of contact for all of you who are interested in helping out. Again, our website is AEA4USA.com, and we will be posting on there information where you can reach us, where you can reach Tony to help out, and also we'll have a number of articles that you can find out more about what's going on over there, including videos. But we want to say right now that these videos are graphic. Many of them are the videos that you hear alluded to by the press. These will be unedited. So please make sure there are no children or sensitive types around if you are going to watch these. They're vile, they're disgusting, they're savage. So please be careful. But if you choose to know about them, we will make them available on our website. Again, Tony, thank you for your efforts. Thank you for the sacrifice that you're making, and we wish you Godspeed in your continuing work for justice and the American way. Thank you.
Lawrence, thank you. And if I might, I have one last thing I forgot to mention.
Certainly.
The St. Mary's Parish, it's a Assyrian Christian Catholic church in Tarzana, California. They are sending massive amounts of money to all the displaced Christians and civilians that are living in squalor, trying to survive outside of the war zone up in northern Iraq. So this church, you can go to their website. I believe it's St. Mary's AssyrianChurch.com, but it is the St. Mary's Parish Assyrian Christian Church, Assyrian Catholic Church of the East in Tarzana, California. Father George over there and most of the members are in support of this movement, and they are sending massive amounts of money from donors to that humanitarian effort, not the military effort. There is a difference, and they cannot send money to the military effort, but I want to encourage those that are willing and capable to also support that cause. Thank you, Lawrence.
Absolutely, and we'll post that information on the website as well. Again, we don't make a penny out of this. Every penny that is sent to us for this purpose is forwarded. We don't keep a cent, even for admin purposes. Thank you again, Tony. Thank you for all of those who are working toward this end. And also our listener in Spain. Again, we're all in this together. There is a grave danger facing the world. It is not radical Islam. It is Islam. And we need to face that fact. And we need to stand together to make sure that we stop it. And the sooner, the better. Well, that's our revolutionary look at the news. Now we're going to go on to This Week in American History. We here at Revolution Television and Revolution Radio are proud of our American exceptionalism. We are part of a world that has been contributed to and built up by many nations all over the world. We had a listener from Spain. All of us have done our part to contribute to the world. And we in America are standing up against those who are telling us that we need to be ashamed of the contributions that we have made over our history. Bull-oni. We're not ashamed. We're proud of what America has done. And one of our ways, the small way that we have to keep that American spirit alive, is to look at our little elements of our proud history every week. We go back over some events that happened in American history over the last week, a remembrance of America the Great. And so we're going to do that right now. We're going to go back to March the 11th and talk about some events. Some of these are big historical events. Some of them are just interesting cultural facts. Kind of have a potpourri of all of those. So let's go back to March the 11th and start this off. March 11th, 1861, the Confederate Constitution was adopted by the Confederate Congress. 1918, the first cases of the Spanish flu, apologies to our friend there in Spain, but that was the name that was given to it, Spanish flu, were reported in the United States. This is back in 1918. The epidemic would kill 600,000 in the United States and tens of millions around the world. 1941, President Roosevelt signed the Lend-Lease Bill, which provided war supplies to nations fighting against the Axis powers of Germany, Italy, and Japan. Once again, we've seen how we must make a stand against evil. back in the late 30s and early 40s that was consisting of Germany, Italy, Japan, also the Soviet Union. But for political reasons, we found cause to ally with them. But we must make a stand against evil, because evil is aggressive. It will spread. It's not content. It is imperialist by nature. It will spread. And if we don't stop it, we'll have to suffer under it. Well, in 1942, General Douglas MacArthur left the Philippines for Australia, declaring, "I shall return." He kept that promise a little over 2 years later. In 1960, on March the 11th, Pioneer 5 was launched. It orbited the Sun between Earth and Venus and was one of the first probes to explore the solar system. March 12th, 1755. A steam engine was used to pump water from a copper mine in New Jersey. It was the first known use of a steam engine in the United States. 1912, the Girl Scouts was founded in Savannah, Georgia by Juliet Gordon Law. 1923, a motion picture with sound recorded on the film was first demonstrated in Los Angeles. 1933, President Franklin D. Roosevelt gave the first of his radio fireside chats to calm fears about the lingering depression, a depression that would linger for another decade or so. 1947, President Harry S. Truman established the Truman Doctrine, which affirmed that the United States would help nations fighting to resist anti-democratic forces. Moving on now to March the 13th. 1639, Harvard College was named after one of its first benefactors, clergyman John Harvard. 1868, the United States Senate began the impeachment trial of President Andrew Johnson. 1930, astronomers at the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona, announced the discovery of a ninth planet, which they later named Pluto. More recently, Pluto was downgraded to a dwarf planet and is no longer considered one of the major planets in our solar system. It is approximately 30 times less massive than the next smallest known planet, which is Mercury. March 14th, 1783, the American Revolution was drawing near an end, but its objective was in grave peril. Congress lacked the money to pay the heroic soldiers who had sacrificed so much for so long in the cause of independence. Disgruntled senior officers camped in Newburgh, New York, spoke of mutiny against the government. George Washington, aware of the crisis, met with his officers to urge them to once again put the welfare of their country above their own interests. He began to read a letter from a congressman explaining Congress's plight, but began to fumble over some of the words. He paused with dramatic effect. He then hesitantly pulled from his pocket something his officers had never seen him use: reading glasses. Washington spoke softly. "Gentlemen, you must pardon me. I have grown gray in the service of my country, and now find myself growing blind." The surly officers began to weep as they remembered the great personal sacrifices Washington himself had endured. When the general left the room, they voted to give Congress more time, and the Revolution was saved. 1794, Eli Whitney patented the cotton gin, which revolutionized the harvesting of that crop. 1923, President Warren G. Harding became the first president to file an income tax report. 1950, the FBI released its 10 most wanted list for the first time. 1951, United Nations forces led by American troops recaptured Seoul during the Korean War. March 15th, 1493, Christopher Columbus returned to Spain, concluding his first of 4 voyages to the New World. 1767, Andrew Jackson, the 7th President of the United States, was born in Waxhaw area of South Carolina. 1820, Maine became the 23rd state. 1892, Voting machines were first authorized for use in elections in the state of New York. Could the hanging Chad be far behind? 1916, General John J. Pershing led American troops across the Mexican border, chasing after Pancho Villa. In 1919, the American Legion was founded in Paris. March 16th, 1751, the fourth President of the United States, James Madison, was born in Port Conway, Virginia. 1802, President Thomas Jefferson signed a measure by Congress authorizing the establishment of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York. 1850, Nathaniel Hawthorne's classic novel, The Scarlet Letter, was published. 1926, Robert H. Goddard launched the world's first liquid fuel rocket. 1995, astronaut Norman Thagard became the first American to visit Mir, the Russian space station. And March 17th, St. Patrick's Day, 1737, the first public celebration of St. Patrick's Day was held in the American colonies. It was organized by the Charitable Irish Society of Boston. By the way, contrary to popular belief, St. Patrick was not Irish. 1776, the long blockade of Boston Harbor ended when British forces were compelled to evacuate the city after General George Washington deployed cannons onto Dorchester Heights overlooking the British position. It was one of the first of the American victories during the Revolution. 1898, the first practical submarine, the USS Holland, conducted its trial runs off Staten Island. 1958, the United States launched its second satellite, Vanguard 1. And then, speaking of submarines, in 1959, the USS Skate became the first submarine to surface at the North Pole. The Nautilus was the first one to travel under the North Pole. It was also the first nuclear-powered submarine. The Skate was the first one to actually surface there. Well, that wraps up this news, or these days in American history. And it's time for us to wrap up our program. The American Eagle Alliance is leading the charge in fighting the Second American Revolution, AR2. We believe that more of the same is only going to get us more of the same. And so we have pioneered a new pathway to rescue America the Great, to reestablish our Constitution and all of those wonderful values that made us great in the first place. Among other things, we conduct Patriot Training Days. It will teach you and your organization how to fight and win the Second American Revolution in less time than it took to win the first, without taking over the White House, the Congress, the Supreme Court, or any constitutional amendments. In 1776, we the people rocked the world. It's time to do it again. This is not a rehash of tired, old, failed ideas from the Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives, left or right. This is vintage American. It is historic. It is heroic. And as you've heard today, we have a global perspective. We do not believe in intervening. We believe in influencing. But every now and then, in order to protect our own interest and to protect the cause of right and decency in the world, you got to move in and do something. So if you'd like to schedule an event for your area and its Patriot organizations, please call 909-913-7878. Again, area code 909-913-7878. Or if you'd like to have me come by and talk about any of the ideas in Solutions, Guidebook for Rebuilding America the Great, or AR2, Handbook for the Second American Revolution, you can schedule that by calling that same number, 909-913-7878. Both those books are available in a variety of sources. Probably the easiest way to get them is through Amazon. And yes, bulk rates are available for bulk purchases. So just call that same number, 909-913-7878. Remember, you can go to AEA4USA.com and see past recorded episodes, as well as lots of other materials of interest to the Patriot community. And we will be posting all that information that Tony was talking about so you yourself can learn more about this growing crisis with Islam around the world. And if you'd like to download our theme song, which is called American, you can get that on iTunes. It only costs 99 cents. And whenever you purchase that or any of the books that I mentioned, you're helping to fund the revolution. Again, if you go to iTunes, search for these things, iTunes or Amazon, search for it under my last name, Hebron. It's the fastest way to get there, Hebron. And now our quote for the day. It's a little bit longer one, but it comes from a notable Noah Webster. If you know anything about Noah Webster, you kind of associate him with a dictionary. True. He was the author of the American Dictionary of the English Language, which in 1828, which was the first American dictionary of the English language, but he did so much more. He is one of our founding fathers. And this is what he said about the kind of people we should consider for election. So we're already talking about Hillary, who's considered by many to be the Democratic candidate's shoo-in for candidate for president. We have to say, really? That's the best you can come up with? Well, here's another note on that regard from Noah Webster. When you become entitled to exercise the right of voting for public officers, let it be impressed on your mind that God commands you to choose for rulers just men who will rule in the fear of God. The preservation of a Republican government depends on the faithful discharge of this duty. If the citizens neglect their duty and place unprincipled men or women in office, the government will soon be corrupted. Laws will be made not for the public good so much as for selfish or local purposes, as Ian pointed out. Corrupt or incompetent men and women will be appointed to execute the laws. The public revenues will be squandered on unworthy men and women, and the rights of the citizens will be violated or disregarded. If a Republican government fails to secure public prosperity and happiness, it must be because the citizens neglected the divine commands and elected bad men and women to make and administer their laws. Noah Webster. I made a few little additions there to include women, which were not authorized to run for election or vote at the time of Noah Webster that he made this, but they certainly are now. So we extend that courtesy to both genders. Pick godly people who stand for good values. Otherwise, we suffer for it, and we've certainly seen enough of that. Well, thanks for listening to us. Tell your friends they can listen to archived episodes on aea4usa.com. We hope to talk with you again next week on Revolution Radio and Revolution Television. Now, let's get cracking, Patriots. We've got a country to save. Good night.